Well, thank you very much, viewers who are following us on UDP Media Network at our studios at the Mandai Political Bureau. Well, this is your program lead, and as we promised, we are with the honorable member who is no other than Madi M.K. Sise, who is the MP of Serekunda West, the biggest constituency in the Gambia. The honorable is here with us, and he is the one we are going to host today, and we have so many questions for him. But before we start the program, I just would like to extend sincere greetings and gratitude to the party leader, His Excellency Lawyer Sinu Dabo, Deputy Party Leader and the party President Yamdo Yabo, and all the other honorable members of the party who are now joining us, watching us in our program. Well, we have another topic in our agenda which we would like to start discussing before we get into the program proper. Well, on development, we have an important topic that we want to discuss, which is Yankuba Dabo, the chairman of Brikama Area Council, has enrolled 76 youths on the municipal council police security, which is very, very important because that will help the municipality in order to make sure that the unemployment rate will be minimized. So, Honorable, how do you see that?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mbu. And then, first of all, we can welcome our honorable parliamentarian MP. We call it now National Assembly member.
Yeah.
To our midst here at UDP Media Network. However, before I proceed, I would allow Honorable to greet our viewers. Then we
Exactly.
Honorable, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, Mr. Navan and Boop, for inviting me. It's my pleasure to be on the platform. I may have been on other platforms, but this is the first time I'm in the Mandai Bureau. This shows that we are expanding, we are developing.
Exactly.
Because they cannot have any development without media. So if there's a studio in the bureau, that is really laudable. So I thank you for that, and I thank you viewers, those within and outside the country. It's my pleasure to be with you.
Thank you very much, Honorable. Coming back to Yankuba Dabo at Brikama East Coast region,
yes.
Recruiting some young people into the security in order to secure the municipality at that end. I think, or the area council at that end, I think it is very laudable because this is going to increase many youths going into to have been employed.
Exactly.
But because we have a prominent politician with us here, the standing of UDP, I think have something to say about that. Honorable, what do you think about that?
Well, it's, you know, UDP has a lot of human resource, and our mayors and our chairpersons are one of those very human resources we have. They are very innovative, and they go inventive. Really, for the first time in the history of the Brikama Council, for the council to recruit their own security unit on men and women to the tune of above 70. Is a big achievement. Like Boom said, it will reduce unemployment, and then there will be self-reliance as well.
Exactly.
So in other municipalities like the KMC, they have their own security units. So if Brikama also is coming up with that, starting with our own mayor, with our own chairperson, Yankuba. And even before that, we have seen a lot of innovative things that Dabo has been going into. The issue of giving every ward in the Brikama Council $1 million for ward development is also a very laudable thing. So
big plus.
We really have human resources, and if our people can do such at the local government level, at council level, one could have imagined what would they have done if they are given the mantle of leadership in the government.
Yes.
So I really applaud him for that, and I encourage him to continue.
But some of his critics say this can create some enmity between his recruited police and the government police that are working within that area. Do you think there is a possibility?
No, in fact, councils should gradually divorce from general duty police. The councils are local government, local institutions. They should have their own municipal police. That is how it operates outside this country. You cannot go to any municipality outside the country, in Europe, in America, in others. You have national security, taking care of the security within the council. No, they have their municipal police. This is an ideal system. So really, I think if I were Dabo, what I would have done is the two, for now, for a start, will be working hand in hand, and gradually, I will take over the entire municipality, the municipality with the council with police will gradually take over the entire security of the area council, and then the police have more than enough to do. The crime rate in this country is skyrocketing, so we don't need them at that level. Let them go out and try to tackle the crime rates that are going on. So I think it's a lot of a thing that cannot be any class, and I'm sure the way I'm talking, this is the way the Chairman Dabo is thinking also.
Wonderful.
It's just start with 76, and gradually he will increase that number, and then by the time it's about 1, 2, 3 years, then the municipal police will take care 100%, and the police can go back. Yeah.
What's the next point?
Well, Chairman Landim Bisane at the Mansakonko Area Council has also presented 6 motorbikes to his revenue collectors, just to make sure that he enhance the revenue base.
Right. I think that also is very good, because some of those areas you can see are in the remote area.
Yes.
So if they can have a motorbike, it's quicker and it is low cost when it comes to maintenance.
Exactly.
So I think that is also a good move.
Yeah.
Honorable will have some contribution.
Sure. Like I said, our men on the ground, be them at the councils, be them at the municipal councils, be them at the parliament, UDP elected persons are doing wonderful things day in, day out. And I think that is enough for Gambian to say, look, it's high time we give the mantle of leadership to this party. Because it's a test. If our councils can do far better than other councils under other parties in this country, that's a plus for us.
Of course.
And this is exactly what is happening. You cannot, I would say it loud and clear, you cannot compare our mayors in Banjul and KMC and our chairpersons in Brikama and Masakonka council. You cannot compare them to any other councils in this country. Not Basse, not NPD, not Sierra, North and South. So therefore this is a clear manifestation that the party's men are showing their quality and their capabilities.
Wonderful.
Not by way of mouth, but by practical.
Wonderful. Before Mr. Mook come to the next point, in connection to the Lord Mayor, Talib Ahmed Bensouda, we realized some time ago, Honorable, he want to start certain road networks within the municipality. But we made to understand that the government is trying to delay for reasons we don't know. As a member of Parliament at our National Assembly representing us, do you know anything concerning that?
I not fully, but I'm aware of the hurdles that the mayor is facing as far in terms of those infrastructure development in the KMC Municipal Council. And these are the very people who are so lousy on the media, especially state media, saying that this council has not constructed a single road in the municipality. These are the same people who are now sabotaging his development efforts. Well, I think, but Talib is a level-headed person, and I know he should know what to do, because if I were him, what he could have done now is to face the parliamentary committee that is responsible for works and communication, and put down all his hurdles before the committee,
so that they can,
and the committee can intervene. Yes, because the parliament is there for everybody.
Yes. Right.
So whether you are on the left or on the right, if you are really, some people are just unnecessarily giving you hurdles of development. We have committees across that can address any issue. So I'm so, like I said, he's a level-headed person. if he did not know, well, perhaps this will be an opportunity for him to, if he's following,
yes,
for him to take up and then put his house in order and then approach the parliamentary committee. And put his,
what's the next point?
Well, thank you very much. Then what we're going to do is we start the interview proper with the honorable member. Yes. And the first agenda is we have observed that he just launched 3 books at the Keraba Conference Hall, which was very, very, very important. These are 3 books which concern very important issues. One is the griot Jaliba Kuyate, and the other one which is about himself, and the third one which is about the nation.
Yes.
And these 3 books are very, very important. I was following the launching. Okay. I invited the party leader and the mayors of Banjul and many important dignitaries who has graced that occasion. Wonderful. It was really, really important to have that 3 books launch. Well, we would like to have a clue of what inspired him about all those books that he has written.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Mbub, and thank you, Laban. I'm sure you know my profession is
journalism. Of course.
A natural journalist really, keep writing.
Right.
And actually, the inspiration is especially for my own memoir, is that I had gone through a lot of difficulties during the Jammeh regime, and I think I thought in my quiet moment that I should not just leave those experiences and into oral history, because as time goes on, they will die out.
Right.
Children that will come after me, many of them would not know about it. So I thought it's better now I should put those memoirs together so that anybody who reads my memoir, that is journalism, is it a blessing or curse, they will really know how journalists operate during Jammeh's time, and how particularly I have suffered in the hands of Jammeh. And still, that did not deter me from doing my job. I still keep pushing my pen. And for present-day journalists, if they read it also, they can have some inspirations from it.
Inspired.
Yeah, because actually one of the strongest things that really protected me during those hurdles, those difficult moments, is reporting the truth.
Yes.
So, however they want to manipulate it, they could not. They discovered that what I have said and what I have written in that particular newspaper, which is the independent newspaper, was the fact. They couldn't twist it anyway. So it was the truth that really protected me throughout. So anybody who reads that book,
even
really
from the records, I saw that you are part of those arrested during the Chamoy Bridge.
Yes, I was.
You were among them.
I was
covering what the party was doing.
Yeah, I was a very young journalist in those days. I think I should be in my 30s or so, when my editor-in-chief, late Swaibu Konate, assigned me, after the press release of the United Democratic Party was out, he assigned me to cover the nationwide tour of the party leader. Yeah. So that's how I followed the entourage, and then was reporting, and then, because then we publish weekly, so every week Swaibu will really publish very interesting things that happen.
Wonderful.
So as a result, Jammeh regime was so hostile and intolerant to the United Democratic Party, and no doubt that it is the effort of the United Democratic Party that is finally put him down. Yes. And so they really sent some talks to really disrupt the convoy.
So that was a book about you. So what about the other one about Jaliba?
Jaliba, I have, any of us or anybody who really lived through the number of years I have would realize that when it comes to the plane of the scholar Kora, apart from late Lalo Kebadrani, which is in the 80s, 80s or 70s. He was a very renowned Kora player, very instrumental. So, apart from him, when Jaliba started playing the strings, I have not seen anybody who matched him. And then I've also seen that he has played in and outside of the country several times. And most of the songs that he has composed are really very educative. And like I said, nobody, even as we are speaking now, you cannot point out to any Kora player who matches him. So, such a person that is our own, deserve to be written about, so that his legacy will not be left to oral history. Like I said, I don't want my legacy to be left to oral history. So something must be written about that. And quite interestingly, during the biography, because actually he tells his story and I write it by asking questions. So I come to understand that the Kora itself is
Gandhi himself.
Oh yes.
You were there.
I didn't write this thing out of the blue.
Yes.
That's
what many people thought.
No, I approached Jaliba and said, Jaliba, I want to write your life history. And he was so sick.
So what was the reason why he didn't come to the luncheon then?
Well, you know, he's a very busy man, but I can say he had already launched his book. Because he had already given me $100,000.
Wow.
As his contribution.
Wow.
So whether he was physically there or not, he has really done the launching. But really it coincided with his many kind of programs. You know, Jaliba is always contracted. Sometimes he goes up to about 3-4 months. And actually, you know, if you sign a contract with a certain group, you cannot really leave us to come and attend the launching. But he has adequately done well as far as launching is concerned.
Wow, so what about the third book?
The third book actually is the rise and fall of Jammeh's dictatorship.
Wonderful.
That one is looking at the holistic human rights abuses of the Jammeh regime, abuses against the media, abuses against the religion, abuses against politicians, abuses against soldiers, abuses against tribes. So the entire book is about that. But then the few chapters before getting into the gist of that atrocities, I was able to talk to a lot of historians. One outstanding is Hassan, is a very good researcher historian, to lay the foundation of how Gambia was before independence. Who were the key players during in our independence? So the first few chapters captured the likes of Sadauda, the likes of Gaba Jahumba, the likes of Francis Small, and a lot more others, the likes of P.S. Njai, P.S. Njai. So that laid the foundation of our democracy. And then into the regime of the first president, Sadauda, and then now his origin. Now the reader will see the comparison between Jawara as a Democrat and Jammeh as a
dictator. Okay, before we come to the next question, if somebody needs these books, where can he have them?
Well, the books are currently at Timbuktu, but I can tell you the third book is out of stock. The last books that were there were sold yesterday.
So you have to produce more.
So I need to reprint the rise and the fall of Jammeh.
Okay, I have a follow-up question. Honorable Madi Sise is a prominent politician, everybody knows. But some of his critics will say, as such a renowned politician, launching 3 books, and the place is not stormed by political party sympathizers. That was a point. I don't know whether you don't want to make it that way or you want to make it a low key. What happened?
Well, actually, we wrote, I think, to almost all the political parties because we felt that politicians had a big stake in the rise and fall of Jammeh's dictatorship because the political parties are victims. Although the biggest victim is the National Democratic Party. I wrote to them, but the UDP was fully represented because the party leader and Secretary General was there and made a statement, and then other militants like Mbata Bido and others were there. And then other political parties were there. Dabo was there with his party representatives and others. So, but the other parties didn't turn up. And then we also rely on social media. I think we did a lot of social media messaging, almost a month or 2 before the launching. But actually, I was told by somebody who keeps going to almost launching and said he has not seen the kind of turnout we had in all the places he went to for book launching.
But these political parties contributing by these books?
Well, I know at the launching, Rohi Malik Law.
Because I see Rohi doing an extremely great job.
Rohi just stood up and asked all the women in the hall to stand up and line up. So he gave, I think that day she distributed 32 books.
32 books, yes.
32 books, that amounts to 32,000.
Yes,
because the books were going for 1,000. And then there was another gentleman also who also took Jaliba's book, I think 18 of Jaliba's book, he also distributed to young men. And then a lot of other people also both books.
In a nutshell, the launching was successful.
Very successful. Very successful. Like I said, in fact, I have run out of the dictatorship book.
Yes.
So I had to repeat that. It's completely out of stock.
But what is the next question? I have some.
Well, the next question is coming to parliamentary proceedings, which is of great importance, and there are so many critics nowadays in the public space that why did the parliamentarians allow the budget to be passed without a debate? This is something which is of great concern to Gambians, and they are saying that many of our politicians are not definitely active in taking up their responsibilities. So we want Honorable to clear the doubts.
Yes,
Well, that is far from the truth to say that many of the politicians are not interested in taking up responsibilities. But one, I think before I move forward, I think I must explain how Parliament operates.
Yes.
How Parliament operates, because Parliament operates by numbers. It's not by just speaking. It's numbers that speaks. And we have a Parliament which has a majority on the government side. If you look at their 18 seats, plus the 5 nominated members, it's theirs. And then you look at some of the independents that have aligned with them, and you look at the APRC's 2 and the NRP's 3. So actually that will give them an edge over UDP that has 14 elected members on our ticket and 1 independent on our side, that is Usumbala, making it 15. So how we operate now is, particularly to this very budget, when it was read, the other side, the government side, the NPP side, rose up. I think it was the majority leader, or one of them, rose up to come with a motion. That's how Parliament operates. A motion is a way of you want something to be done. And the motion was we adjourn that parliamentary session without debate on the budget. And then outside, the UDP said, no, we cannot do that. We must debate on it. So if there is that pull and push, the only way that the presiding officer, that the speaker, can advocate among us is to put that into vote.
Okay. And then the majority will carry the vote.
Certainly, yes.
But
because that one requires only a simple majority.
Simple majority. But don't you think the ruling party, those supporting their agenda, they don't have a motive behind that they don't want the budget to be debated?
Well, whatever motive they have, really, to debate over the budget would be an advantage for them. Yes, because there are a lot of things that need to be clarified, and which they are discredited for. If they had allowed a debate, at the end of the debate, the minister would have come back and looked at clarifications. So that would have helped them. But because they don't know, it's ignorance, they think that because when we subject it to debate, those issues of budgetary issues, we will raise them up, because we know there are a lot of things in that budget that we would like the public to know publicly. And but then the minister would have come to their defense. But like, I have never heard anywhere in the history of this country where a budget was laid and is not debated, because that is not even helping the minister. The minister must know his faults, and it is only the oppositions and some level-minded pro-government MPs that will speak the truth and pin out some of those problems in the budget. Then he will come out for clarification.
But the finance minister said they were waiting for development partners, the donors, to come. That is why the budget was late. What does that tell?
No, that is one aspect of it. You know, that is addressing the issue of why the budget was late.
Yes.
In fact, the whole thing was unconstitutional, because we have amended the law that the budget should have come at least 6 months before like 6 years, number of 3 months before. When it used to be less than that. And the minister and the entire government could not meet that because, like you said, they were waiting for some budget support that should have come.
Yes.
That would have helped in the 30% increment. Yes. But that is not a good defense, because we could have gone with the budget, and I think at any point in time, if the donors come, then the government can increase the salary. So that really, for me, it is not.
Then are you satisfied with the budget when it was being published?
No, I am not. Simply because we have not much effort is put into making our budget a development budget. Yes, the NPP and the Alliance say it's development, but there is no development budget. You go into each of those ministries' budget lines and look at how much percentage is allocated to development. Very minimal sectors. Very minimal to development. Most of the chunk of the budget goes to salaries, that is what you call personal emoluments, that is salaries, allowances, and other issues. That will not go into development. That cannot come and build any road for us. That cannot build any hospital. That cannot scale any medicine for us. So the development budget is so small. And the other thing why I am not happy with the budget is we have year in, year out been inheriting what is called a budget deficit. So there is not much enough to really offset the deficit. And the deficit is simple. In a simple terminology, is you need $1,000 to do a work in your house, but you only have $700. So you are short by 300, and that is your deficit. Okay. You need to find that. It's either you go and borrow, or somebody give you charity to cover the 300, then you have 1,000. So this is how we have been operating all along. But we could have stopped it, because can we stop a budget deficit? We'll have to look at our expenditures. If the expenditure is cut down, it can meet. For example, like I said, you have 1,000 needs, that's your need, but you have only $700. Right. In order not to go into a budget deficit, look at the expenditures that give you $1,000. Cut the unnecessary one until it comes to 700. Scale of preference. Then you come to 700, you go wonderful. But this is not happening. This government keep on increasing the budget, the expenditure. Yep. We have seen the president increase the number of cabinet ministers in this country. Right. That's not a wise decision for a budget that is, you are running a budget deficit. Yeah, you are running a budget deficit. You are creating more and more ministries. There is no need for us to have 2 ministries of education in this country. One minister is enough. Yes. Not higher an education. There is no need of having 3 ministers where 1 minister can manage the digital and economic, the communication and digital economy minister, the information and works minister. Because these 3 can be put together as one minister. Right. You can get a lot of these scenarios within the cabinet, down to the departments. And if we cut them down, we really go with a budget that will not be in deficit, because they are unnecessary expenditures. And when it comes to travels, government need to control by really reducing the number of travels and also downsize the delegations. This will all go towards addressing the deficit, because you are now controlling your expenditure. But so far as we are not controlling our expenditure and we do not have any sources of income, we will always go into a deficit. And that deficit, the meaning is we'll be borrowing money. This is the point. We're borrowing money. As we speak now, the debt service of our budget is huge, I think 27%. Meaning that all the money we are getting, a chunk of it is going to pay back the loans with interest. So that is the effect. That is the effect of really running a budget that is in deficit, and you are not controlling your expenditures, and you want to, fill the gap by getting growth. That's
I think we are running out of time. But do you have next question?
Yes, what we have next question is we have observed that the honourable member has sponsored a bill, which is the rental bill at the Parliament, which was approved. And we don't see this bill being implemented, because still the rent is still high. There's nothing done by the government, and we don't know what is the way forward. As far as the honourable is here, we want to know why they don't take any step in trying to...
The way forward is this time around, it's not government's fault. It's not government's fault. This is a bill that comes to address the mode of payment of rents,
Exactly.
how rents can be increased. You know, that's what this bill has come to do, and it is now enacted. It's a law.
It's a law.
Now, government cannot do anything about it. Now it's left to Mbub and Naban. If Naban is a landlord and Mbub is renting in Naban's house, and Naban said, okay, your rent is 3,000, I'm going to increase to 5,000. Mbub should call his attention to the rent because no, the act says now you cannot increase anything more than 5%. Calculate 5% of 3,000 and say this is what you should increase. And that, even that should be within a period of 3 years. You cannot increase again until after 3 years.
Okay.
That's
So
a very important point.
If this tenant and this landlord try to do things in their own place in Kesein, you cannot blame government for that.
Yeah, you can't blame.
It is only when you refuse, the landlord refuses to that, then both should go to the court. That's the next step to do.
Okay.
Every council has a rent tribunal. We have it here in KMC, we have it in Brikama, we have it in Banjul. Every council has a rent tribunal. You go to the rent tribunal and then settle your dispute in the courts.
Okay.
If that is not done, you cannot blame government for that.
Yeah, I think this
This
is
law,
very
many
clear.
people don't know about that.
this law is different from other laws where government has to implement. This one, it is us who should implement it, not government.
This is a very good,
Okay.
important point. Yes.
And I've just given you you know, not really in detail, but like I say, the issue of salary increment, rent increment. Landlords cannot increase nothing more than 5%
Of the amount
that you are paying.
you have to pay, yeah.
If you are paying 3,000, it should be 5% of 3,000. If you are paying 7,000, it should be 5% of 7,000. If you are paying 20,000, it is 5% of
5%
20,000.
of-
Not less, not more. And even that percent should be within 3 years. Once it is increased in 2025, the landlord has no right to increase again until 2028. If he does, that's a breach of the law.
Yes.
And in terms of asking people to pay 2-3 months in advance, if your rent is 7,000 downwards, you should be paying every month,
Monthly.
not 2-3 months together.
Together.
If the landlord wants to ask for that, he says no. The law says no.
Okay.
From 7,000 downwards, I am only allowed to pay every month my 7,000 or
Yes.
my 6,000 or my 5,000.
Okay.
But you cannot ask somebody whose rent is 7,000 or 6,000 or 5,000. You cannot ask the person to pay 3, 4, 5, 6 months.
Okay.
That's around. That's
Above that?
Above that, yes, landlords can ask for 2-3 months, 4, 5. So these are things that are really in
Yes.
Unless really the landlord and the tenant discusses and say, look, this is what the law says now. If they agree, oh, okay, I know, I didn't know, then he abide by that. If he insists, then you have to go to the courts. We need to test the courts. I have said this over and over. I would take you to the case of Yakumba. Before, Jammeh was just sacking nominated members.
Yes.
And they take it like that. Nobody challenges.
Nobody challenges.
But Yakumba challenges her case.
Exactly.
So now, the president knows that he cannot
Not
sack
sack
a nominated member.
Right.
Once you nominate, his power stops at you nominate Naban.
Nominate.
When Naban goes to the parliament and took the Quran and swore as a member of parliament,
Yes.
the president cannot sack him.
That's quite clear.
So he tested the courts.
Yes. And it works.
And it works, yes.
So this Rent Act also, people must test them.
You are right.
Yes, yes.
I have extra 2 questions here. One is just an overview. The diasporan voting. This is a bone of context. Everywhere you go, people are talking about it. Even our relatives outside are calling to pressurize the people within. What is the way forward?
Well, I think Gambians should just teach Barrow a lesson in terms of this diaspora voting. The Barrow government and his members of parliament flatly refuse the rights of our people abroad to vote. Already, the constitution of the Gambia has given rights and powers to every Gambian to register, irrespective of wherever you are. Section 39 said it very clearly that every Gambian of the age of 18 and sound mind should be registered and vote and voted for. Full stop. It never said that, okay, those in the diaspora should not be registered.
No,
It never said, so it just said that every Gambian, so now it is, the onus is on the government and IEC to register our diasporan people to be able to vote. The only thing they will use as a defense to say that no, but the the Constitution also continues to say that they must be registered in a constituency.
Yeah.
That is not an issue. If I live in UK, but I come from Serekunda West, register me in UK. Under Serekunda West. That's your duty.
That's the simple thing.
The Constitution is only giving the IEC and the government to say, give the diasporans the opportunity to do it. Go and give them the opportunity. You cannot vote if you don't register. And now, what the Barrow government and his MPs and their allies did when we are looking at the election bill 2026 or 2025, section 14, which says that the IEC should go and register them. They deliberately expunged that.
Okay.
And like I said, Parliament operates by numbers.
numbers.
We refute, say no, and they said no issue. So when there was a pull and push, all what the speaker can do is to put it to vote. And they had more votes. So now is the NPP-led government and their MPs and allies who are now denying the people in the diaspora to vote. You see? And when we further sat over it a few days ago to continue the deliberation on the bill, again, the majority leader, who is NPP, Benetunkar of Kantora,
yes,
stood and objected that wherever there is foreign countries, we should delete it. So, yes, we did at the first one and then they succeeded. But the next one, we keep saying no. We will be on record to say we refuse, but we can't just let it go like that.
Yes.
The third one, we outnumbered them. For some reason, yes. So that one stayed.
Wow,
another one also, we outnumbered the states. So they were demoralized that day. So two of the clauses in the current bill has really catered for the people in the foreign countries to be registered. So, but the bill is not completed. Probably in our next session we will complete the election. But here, actually, the fact of the matter is the Constitution has given right every Ghanaian to vote, including those in the diaspora. It's very clear about it. And they will tell you also this issue of demarcation. No. Section 88 can be amended and it is not an entrenched clause.
Okay.
Once that is amended, in fact, there are some law luminaries who say that no, you don't even need to amend Section 88 to expand the number of constituencies. Yes. They said already there is an amendment on the Election Act in 2015, which says that at least 53 constituencies. So when the law says at least, meaning that you can go up to 1,000.
Exactly.
So this is what some of the law luminaries are saying, that you don't even need to.
You don't even need
so
to.
therefore, everything in the Constitution is really in the favor of the diaspora people to vote. Now the onus is on government to make it happen. And IEC has voluntarily accepted. In one of our interventions with them, we went to a point, we discussed with diaspora, we have looked at all the countries and the number of statistics were shown, how many governments are in the US, how many governments, and they agreed that they can go and do it. So here I think
the political will is not there.
It's not there, they're just jittered. They're jittered, that's why I think they're just afraid. But
And they say that they don't have the financial resources also.
That's not true. That is not true. When it comes to election, there is no government that can tell you I don't have the money. Money is always there. Government never lacks any money.
Okay.
No, money is there. We budget for it. Last time we budgeted for it. So it's just a matter of making a budget for it and then going for it. So really, it's Barrow and these people who are really trying to
somehow they are afraid, I think.
Well, but I hope when we sit over this again, that section 14, we will rescind our decision, because it's parliamentary. We can raise a motion to say, okay, we want to change our mind, and then bring back the 14. Because now I think, the way I see them, I think if we sit again, something will be done about it.
There's possibility.
Yes.
My final question before I give it to Mr. Moore. Honorable, you are an experienced politician. We all know. You are standing firmly in the House of Parliament and the National Assembly. 2026 is fast approaching. Are you fully prepared? Or shall I say, are we fully prepared? What is your point of view?
My answer is, positively we are prepared as a party. The Non-Democratic Party has been in existence for decades now, and we have contested several elections under difficult circumstances. So it is not, we are not first timers in election. Even if there should be, an early election should be called, the UDP will contest. I can tell you, I have said it in one of my interviews with Atlantic TV in Mandinka.
Yes.
I will repeat the same thing. And after listening to that, I think in the NPP camp, there are rumors that they should just question. The police should invite me for questions. But anyway, no police has called me for any question. But then I'm more than willing to
go and
answer
any police station that invites me to question it.
Right.
We are prepared, and we said we will never, this time around, 2026, the United Democratic Party will never sit idly and see people steal our victory. And what we are going to do to stop that, in that interview I said, I will not put that on the table. I will only point to that we are ready and we will not sit idly to see our victories taken away from us. But when we reach to that point, then we will act. If anybody attempts to do that, we will act. And the other thing I said was that if the Barrow-led government want peace to reign in this country, then peace will reign. But if they want otherwise, other than peace, if they want trouble to reign in this country, then trouble will come into this country. I said the ball is in their court now.
In their court, by the way.
They have to play by the rules of the game. If they play by the rules of the game, then the game will go smoothly. But we will never allow anybody to steal our victory. It's over.
It's over.
This I will say it and I'll keep saying this until we reach 2026 and we see anybody who attempts to do it, you will see what we are thinking. And I have also made it very clear that I am not the spokesperson of the United Democratic Party. No. I'm a fully fledged, committed member of the party. And I'm speaking as an individual.
Yes.
But my thoughts are also in the thoughts of millions of Gambians.
Of course.
That's it.
One of our opinion seekers said, he said, Honorable Madis is a well-experienced politician. We would not allow him to man any other position. Even by 2027, we still want him to go back to Parliament. What is your take on that?
Well, I have decided and I have vowed during my last campaign. I said if I win and serve my nation 2 terms in the Parliament, that's enough for me. As you can see, the face is changed now. So I think it's time to
look for another area
and allow young ones to take up.
Yes.
To be a representative is not an easy task.
Not
it really needs an energetic and a very, of course we need experienced people like us.
Yeah.
But then whether I actually man the position or not, the experience is still with me. So whoever is there, I can always coach and then.
Yeah, wonderful.
So,
Mr.
Then what is your take in the president intending to nominate IEC chairman?
Well, I think the president's status quo is the president will have to appoint chairperson.
Yes.
So, but I mean, nominating and appointing chairpersons also have rules.
Okay.
If the president goes by those rules without flouting any of them, it's fine. Anybody is chosen, maybe good. But then it all depends on the rules. If he flouted the laws, that is what is going to
then we will start out fast.
Sure. He cannot, in fact, I can tell you loud and clear, he cannot do otherwise. He must follow the rules.
Okay.
Barrow cannot do otherwise. You cannot have a partisan person, somebody who holds a position in a political party. You cannot have that person in the IEC. That is loud and clear. He cannot do
Final
otherwise.
question.
Well, the final question is the constitution that we want. You know, as the parliamentarians are the custodians of the law. And the constitution, as we know, right now, it is on debate. The 2020 draft and the 2024 draft, and it is on the public space. And people are definitely in doubt whether we're going to have a constitution or we're not going to have a constitution. And as Honorable is here, as they are the custodians of the law, and they are responsible. It is in their hands. And I think it is better for him to enlighten us a little bit on
just
the way forward.
Yes.
Well, I think if Barrow wants them to have a new constitution, we will have it. Again, the onus is on them and the ball is in their court. but not the 2024 draft they have brought to us.
Okay.
That constitution will never see the light.
Yes. Without
the constitution that Barrow and his cabinet took to cabinet, they used the 20 draft that was well consulted, which I watered it down to 0.
Okay.
In a new form called 2024 draft.
draft.
It's just like you put an old wine in a new bottle. Yeah. This constitution is an old wine in a new bottle. You just brand it and call it 2024 constitution. Okay. But this draft has been, it is the 2020 draft that they have pushed.
Okay.
I'll point out 1 or 2 things that clearly tells you that their 2024 draft cannot see the light. 1, in the 2020 draft that was well consulted, Gambians generally agree that no more nominations. The presidents will never have the powers to nominate 5 people. And also empowered among those 5 people to have the speaker and the deputy speaker from that nominated 5. That was in the 1997 constitution. The 2020 draft has cleared that out, and people have really subscribed to that. When they went back and drafted 2024, they brought the same nomination back into the 2024 draft. Secondly, in the 2020 draft, the draft has given opportunity for court system for 14 women to be members of parliament. They went and sliced that by half.
And put 7.
And put 7.
So, also, this issue of diasporic voting is not clearly spelled there. The education sector, also the free education, also has been raised. So, it's a very retrogressive,
and the teacher service commission.
Yes, it's a very retrogressive draft. So, if Barrow wants a constitution, the best thing Barrow could have done was
2020.
Withdraw this 2020 so-called draft and reintroduce the 20 draft that was well consulted, because the CRC has went around all bandabas, all villages in this country, every region, and consulted. And when they were done with the first draft, before they gazetted it, they subjected this draft to the public for people's opinion. They published their first draft, said, this is our first draft, what is your take? And people chip in.
Exactly.
They reconsidered those points and then gazetted. You cannot compare that with 2024 when only 18-20 people sat over it, and then straight away, not subjecting it to the public for scrutiny, they want them gazetted. And now it is before the parliament.
Okay.
I have said this in the floor of the National Assembly that the cabinet were really very dishonest intellectually. Because I don't doubt the intelligence of members of this cabinet. They are all highly qualified and educated people. Degrees. So they're intellectual. They are only being so intellectually dishonest
to
give us that trust. It will not see the light. Because amending the constitution needs a required number of members of parliament to say yes. And that is 3/4.
But you told us that they have the numbers, so how can't you say that
it
will not see the light and they have the numbers?
Yeah, because in the parliament, the law is clear about voting.
Okay.
There are some votes that only needs a simple majority.
Simple majority.
Okay.
There are votes that need a specific vote. In the case of amending the constitution, the law says that you must get 3/4 of the people to say yes.
One side, yes.
Yes. We are 58 in number, so they need 42 members to say yes.
And that is impossible.
If you recall, when the 20 draft was placed before us in 2020, 31 of us said yes, and only 23 said no. But the no's,
is a no stand.
Because we did not have the constitutional requirement of the 3/4. So that's the difference in parliament. There is simple majority, there is specific majority. You cannot amend any part of the constitution without having 3/4 to say yes.
So the procedures are a little bit different.
Yes. Exactly. So as we speak now, even if we put Barrow and all his allies together, they don't have 43 in the parliament.
Of course.
Yes. Right.
If only this bill, only this 2024 has to pass, then they must come and find blessing from us. And right now, like we are speaking, we have secured 14 plus 1, which is 15. And we also have two other members, independent members, with us, which will be 17. And then we have another, the MPs in Fonyi, 5 of them have also So, in a sense, we have about 22.
Wonderful.
So,
before we allow Honorable to give his last statement, just to inform our viewers, this is the new program called LEAD, that is Leadership Engagement, Accountability and Development. And we are rightly starting, today we have already started with Honorable
so this is the
new
yes.
They call it the first. Yeah, I mean
this is the first program.
Yeah, the first one is called the maiden program.
This is the maiden program. Yeah.
I'm so proud to be the first on this platform.
Wonderful, wonderful.
You know, it's your constituency. That is why we prefer having you first before
anybody. Thank you for that consideration.
Thank you very much. Honorable, we will just give you 1 minute to give your closing remarks, and that's it.
What I want to tell Gambians is that 2026 election is just at the corner.
Right.
We must really now weigh the pros and the cons. We have seen solid 8 years leadership of President Adama Barrow. All the promises are zero. Barrow become the most unreliable politician, the most unreliable president in this country. Who will say this today and tomorrow will say that. That type of quality in a leader, really, I don't think Gambians should allow that to continue for the next 5 years. And that aside, we know problems are all over the world, but governments are there to solve the problems. This government has no solution to solve these problems. I have given a simple examples of our budget, how a budget deficit could be controlled. This government cannot do this for the past 10 years. The economy is getting bad, the living cost of Gambians are getting higher, and government is barely doing nothing about it. And they could have done something if they are really knowledgeable. So Gambians, I don't think we should subject ourselves to this horrible type of leaders anymore.
And make a change in 2026. Thank you very much, Honorable.
It's my pleasure being there.
Thank you, Honorable. Well, viewers, this is LEAD. You can be following us every Friday from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. Then we will be there for you to make sure that you get the information that you need.
That is LEAD, Leadership Engagement, Accountability and Development.
LEAD. Yes.